This is Tyler Matzik, and you're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Got a pretty good team this year. You guys are currently a wild card team. You know, knocking on the door of first place in the National League East. How do you feel about this team?
I think we had a great team. I think we got a great chance. Because our starting pitching's been doing great. Our lineup's banging. Bullpen's been doing a pretty good job. So we just stay this course. I think we have a very good chance of winning this division. And you know, when that happens, you know, hopefully we get a good spot in the in the tournament, and we can take the trophy again.
If they can win in Atlanta, if they can perform in Atlanta and get some of those games back, which I believe they can, then the Braves could set themselves up for success. They can make a run in September.
This is Matt Olson. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Well, this is when the Braves are going to catch the Mets. This is when the Braves are really going to make a drive to catch up to the Mets in the division. Because, you know, earlier in the year they had a 10.5 game lead. It was a different perspective. Now, the Braves have already caught the Mets. And I know they're a half game back, but they've caught the Mets. That being said, this is their last chance right here, this couple of week stretch, for them to get ready for that series with the Mets in Atlanta. This is a chance for them to either add on to their lead if they're leading, again, take the lead again, or a chance to extend their lead, whatever the case may be. This is their last chance to bolster whatever they're going to have going into the series with the Mets in Atlanta. This is it.
Hi, this is Phil Necro. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
I think this is a very good team. I think they can make a run at a postseason. They're well in the wild card race right now. But that being said, you know, if you want to set yourself up for, you know, a profitable postseason, I look at it and I look at October right now, and I think you got to win the division.
I'm Luke Jackson. You're On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Luke, you've been one of us this year. You've been a fan this year.
Yeah, it's been different.
Tell me what you see out of this current Braves team.
They're just as good or better than last year. Like, they're clicking on all cylinders, 1 through 9. The back end of the lineup is just absolutely incredible right now. Starting pitching's great, bullpen's great. I mean, they're proving it. Like, the record's going to be, you know, insane. We're hunting down the Mets right now. You know, couple big series coming up, so we can get some traction, get going. The guys look good, and I'm excited. I hate off days, though. As a fan, it's the worst, man.
It is the worst, but it means I can come interview you guys, so I'm thrilled with it.
This is Kyle Wright, and you're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
That's obviously the most important series going forward. No doubt about it. You get swept there, could be detrimental to the season either way. If you lose that series, it could be detrimental to the season. Heck, the Braves may have to sweep that series. The Mets may have to sweep that series. Whatever the case may be, that series is the biggest series of the year for both teams.
Baseball fans, you're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Welcome to On Deck. I'm Tyler Redmond, and as always, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and of course, hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date with everything going on here on Deck, and of course, with the Atlanta Braves. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Of course, after last night's game between the San Diego Padres and the New York Mets, we know who will be moving on to the division series. We're going to talk about all the upcoming Game 1s starting tomorrow. Of course, we're going to talk about that tonight. We're also going to talk about a little bit of the Mets and Padres game last night just for a second. And, of course, really anything that you guys want to talk about. So we're going to talk about that. Make sure to get your comments in. And, of course, anything you want to talk about, we will talk about tonight. Thank you guys again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you will do me a big favor, just make sure to like this video. It really does help out the channel, and I thank you guys all for tuning in. That being said, let's get into it. So again, like I mentioned, we know who's moving on in the postseason. It looks like this. Basically, on the American League side, the Guardians, that is a mistake, I apologize. The Guardians will be moving on to face the New York Yankees. Seattle will be moving on to face the Astros. On the National League side, of course, the Braves will be taking on the Phillies, and the Padres will be taking on Los Angeles. Sorry about that graphic mistake, guys. It will be the Cleveland Guardians. Make no mistake, it will be them taking on the New York Yankees. Now, that being said, I look at this, and I really want to focus heavily on the Braves for obvious reasons. The Braves' road ahead looks like this. Of course, we will be taking on the Phillies. The winner of that moves on to the championship series, that either being, now we know, between either the Padres or the Dodgers. So, with that knowledge, first steps first, can the Braves beat the Phillies? I think you would be sadly mistaken if you thought, the Phillies were the favorite here. I think the Braves are the outstanding favorite, because the Phillies, sure, they have momentum, but the Phillies, a good team, 87-win team, do not really compare, in my mind, to the Braves. A 101-win team with a solid rotation. Of course, it's a little bit up in the air right now with Spencer Strider and whether or not he's going to be able to pitch in the NLDS, although he did feel good today pitching off the mound, so positive signs, but we're not quite sure what his future holds for this postseason. What we do know is, in terms of his future, he did sign a 6-year, $75 million deal today, so Spencer Strider will be wearing an Atlanta uniform, much like a lot of the other young Braves, for a very long time. So that is exciting. Beyond that, for this series, Spencer Strider is a question mark. We do not know just yet what it will be. What we do know is that Max Fried will be getting on the mound for the Braves in Game 1 against Philadelphia. Not sure on who Philly will start just yet, but we do know Max Fried will be the Game 1 starter. I would assume that Kyle Wright will be taking the mound in Game 2. Spencer Strider, a possible Game 3. If not Strider, then probably Morton, with Strider maybe in relief. He does feel good, but we don't know how good he really feels. So there are some question marks with the Braves rotation right now. There is no question marks in the Braves offense. The Braves offense is one thing that you can pretty much rely on, with guys like Swanson, Olsen, Riley, who are always playing, who have been so consistent, especially in the back half of the season. All those guys have been very successful this year, and I think you'll only see that continue in the postseason. No reason to assume otherwise. The way they played in the last series with the Mets was great. The way, they ended the season was great. Now, yes, there is a bit of a layoff, and you have to expect some sort of decline there, and I understand that. But at the same time, I think this team's almost too good to fail. They're playing a rival that, frankly, they are familiar with in the Philadelphia Phillies, and a team that they have a winning record against, an 11-8 record. And I'm not saying that that's everything, especially in the postseason. Of course, it's not everything. But the Braves do have something on the Phillies, and that is good numbers against them this year. The Phillies, of course, coming off the series with the Cardinals, which I don't think very many people expected that they would win, so credit to them. That being said, they're coming off a hard-fought series with the Cardinals, and you can say that goes both ways. It could be momentum. It could be more work and therefore more exhaustion. But I think it doesn't really matter at this point. What these numbers on the screen right now that I'm showing you, the Braves are 11-8 against Philadelphia this year, 6-3 at home. Of course, home field advantage for this series is to the Braves. But that being said, none of this matters. It's all about who shows up at the right time. Max Fried spoke about that in his press conference yesterday. So that is something to keep in mind. As much as we want to predict and look forward to, it's all about who shows up when. And if Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola are on their game, then likely that's 2 wins for the Phillies if our pitchers are not, right? That's just how it goes. But right now, I think the obvious favorite is Atlanta. Philly's road to success is there, but they have to perform at a level that I don't think we've seen the Phillies really play at. What they did to beat the Cardinals, the 9th inning, was great. I just don't know that the Phillies have that in them against the Braves. I think the Braves bullpen has a lot more depth. Of course, Kenley Jansen's recent success is a big part of that. Raisel Iglesias is a big part of that. A.J. Minter is a big part of that. I think the Braves are deeper. And, that being said, depth doesn't show quite as much in a 5-game series as it does a 7-game series, but it does show something. It does show, it does represent something. When you have more options in the pen like the Braves do, I think, when you have 2 certified closers In your bullpen, it's a good mix in a 5-game series. It really is. Raisel Iglesias and Kenley Jansen being those two guys. There are some question marks for the Braves, as there is for any team. In the bullpen especially. There's going to be those question marks, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily amount to the same as for Philadelphia. Philadelphia, game one is not going to be one of their aces. For us, it will be Max Fried. Both of the first 2 games are at home. I do think that is an advantage. Home field advantage doesn't mean everything, but it does mean something. The Braves are 6-3 at home, and home field advantage, a lot of people don't look at that as something that's that important. None of these, I said that these numbers don't matter. That's true, but in a certain context, because these numbers do matter, but they matter for the past. They don't matter for the future. What I will say is that the Braves' home field advantage is much different than a lot of other home field advantages. You've seen people talk about it recently. Jake Arrieta came out on his podcast and spoke about the tomahawk chop when pitchers are being changed for the visiting team. The atmosphere, the crowd. You guys have shown up this year and last year, and you know how influential that can be, and it's true. It is very true. The atmosphere at Truist Park is a lot different than being on the road, say, in Seattle or another team like that. It's a lot different, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. That being said, I do think the Braves are the obvious favorites. I'm not going to say that the Braves are going to walk in and win this in 3 games because I don't think that's true. I think you'll have a little bit of a split, but I do think the Braves will win this series. I would be surprised if they didn't. Not to say it's impossible, it's certainly not, but I do think that the Braves will win this. Any logical person, I think, would say that the Braves would win this or expected to win this, and it would almost be a failure if they didn't. That being said, what about the other series around the league right now? First, let's talk about the other end of the National League, because this Dodgers and Padres series, we don't know a lot about it just yet. Probable pitchers have not been released for this. We don't really know. I assume, the Dodgers have so many options in their starting rotation. They really do, because for me, I look at it and I say Urias is the obvious candidate, but then right behind him is Tony Gonsolin. They have a lot of guys. For the Padres coming off of that 3-game series, they're going to be a little worse for wear, but they have pitching too. I mean, Joe Musgrove pitched excellently, pitched out of his mind the other night, and their bullpen is seeing a lot more success now. Hader's back on track, so that's a good sign for the Padres. And look, here's the deal. I know a lot of people, I run a Braves channel. I'm aware of that. But a lot of people don't want to talk about this postseason. But I hate to break it to you. When I look at the Braves' path, the winner of this series, if the Braves were to move beyond this, is either the San Diego Padres or the Los Angeles Dodgers. So it is important. We know how good the Dodgers are. I think we're all pretty much aware of how good the Padres are. They beat the Mets. They're obviously a contender. They're obviously somebody who can perform. Now, granted, they only beat them in 3 games, but they beat them nonetheless. And this was a big series. Again, credit to Joe Musgrove last night. Really pitched probably the best we've ever seen from him in one of the biggest moments of his career. But I will say this. The winner of that series is going to be a monster for the Braves to tackle. Not to say that it's impossible, but I think it would be that series is a lot more competitive than I think the Mets and Dodgers would have been. I think the Padres are showing up at the right time. I think they have the players, of course, minus Fernando Tatis at the moment, but they have the players. They have the ability to beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers, on the other hand, have great pitching. And so do the Padres. You got to give it to them. But the Padres, again, on short rest, can they tackle the Dodgers? That's the real question. I think those two juggernauts are going to fight it out. I hope they fight it out. From the Braves' perspective, I hope they go to all 7. I hope they go to all 5 games, rather. I hope they play every last one, and I hope they have extra innings. I want those two teams to fight it out, and I would like the Braves to win in 3 or 4 games. That would be ideal for the Braves situation. That being said, of course, the future, we don't know. We'll talk about the championship series once we get there, but our opponent for the championship series is coming out of that Padres-Dodgers, so we will watch that, in the corner of our eye. We'll keep an eye on that as well. Let's flip over to the American League. We're going to talk about the Yankees taking on the Guardians. This is interesting because this is the one that I really think if there is a team to tackle one of the teams in the waiting in the division series, and what I mean by that is the teams that had a bye, the Yankees being one of them, this is the one that I think could happen because the Guardians have good pitching, of course, front run or the front of that being Shane Bieber, but they have the pitching. You see the matchups there. The Yankees is interesting. Of course, Garrett Cole is the front liner there. Nestor Cortez. Luis Severino made a recent return. That is, something to take note of. But the Guardians played really well in the division series. They are more rested than the Padres are going into theirs. And I think it's interesting. I really do. I think this is the one out of everybody in the postseason that I think could do it. I think the Guardians could make it beyond the division series. And after you make it past the division series, who knows what happens going forward. Now, granted, the Yankees have had a great year. They had a better first half than second half. But, of course, Aaron Judge was a big part of that, and what a great year he had. But one player does not make the team. I think the Guardians could very well beat the Yankees. Now, that is not to say that it will happen, and I'm not even predicting that. I think the Yankees are the favorite for a reason. They have the bye for a reason. They have been the better team all year, but the Guardians are playing some of their best baseball right now. They really are. And they have one of the best offenses in the game. And I think if the pitching can hold down and the offense can perform, then I think the Guardians could very well win this. And again, it's not a 7-game series. It's a 5-game series. They don't have to go as deep. I'll put it this way. If the Guardians win Game 1, keep an eye out because they have Shane Bieber ready to go for Game 2. And I think it gets very interesting at that point. Now, of course, Game 1 and Game 2 will be in Yankee Stadium, so that is something to keep an eye on too, home field advantage. But I don't think the Guardians really care about any of that. And I think the Guardians, again, are playing some of their best ball. That being said, we're going to have to wait and see. And I told you, to move on to the other side of the American League, the Astros, I told you guys at the beginning of the postseason that I thought that, in the American League, I thought that it was the Astros and everybody else. I really do. That's kind of where I'm at, especially with the regular season. I think the Astros were miles beyond everybody else in the American League because I thought they were the most complete team. I think they make the most sense to go to the World Series. When you're looking at the postseason bracket, the Astros make the most sense to get there. They just do. That being said, this Mariners versus Astros series is going to be pretty interesting. For the Mariners, you got Gilbert pitching in Game 1 versus Verlander. That's going to be a tough one for him. Luis Castillo following in Game 2 against Christian Javier, most likely. The Astros haven't put anything official out. This is who The Athletic is predicting. That's what I'm showing you right now. I think Verlander's a definite. I think Gilbert's an obvious definite because Seattle's coming off of the series in the wild card. But Game 1, you got to give the edge of pitching to Houston. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have to. Certified Hall of Famer having a great year after returning for Tommy John. Verlander's different. That being said, the Mariners could do something very special. That they very well could. They had, I said this a few weeks ago, they had the longest postseason drought in North America. All sports, not just baseball. The largest postseason playoff, whatever you want to call it, drought in North America. And that being said, they could do something very special here. And if they took down the Astros, watch out for the Mariners. The Mariners are a good baseball team with a lot of young stars. I think they're on the rise. You have Luis Castillo signed for a long time. You have Julio Rodriguez signed for a long time. They have a lot of young stars in Seattle, and I think they're on the rise. But they will have to take down the American League representative in last year's World Series, the Houston Astros, and that will be a tall task as well. So that is the wraparound for the postseason as of now, going into the division series. I want to know what you think, so let me know down in the comment section below. And, of course, do me a favor also by liking this video, subscribing to this channel, hitting the bell for notifications, all that good stuff. It really does help the channel out. And, of course, you can follow me on social media. Those are the tags, so make sure to do that as well. But the most important thing you can do tonight, if you're watching, is like the video. It really does help get the channel out there and get more viewers like you. So thank you guys all for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Let's see what all you guys are talking about. Nicholas says, I definitely think Braves can take it in 4. The Phils are a pesky team, so I'll give them 1 win, but the Braves are definitely a better team. Cardinals were definitely not as good as people thought. I think the Cardinals were as good as people thought. And I'll tell you why. I think, for the Cardinals had game 1 put away in the wild card series. They were up 2-0 with 1 out in the 9th inning. They should have had that game put away. I seriously think that was a managerial mistake. I'm not going to say that's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not. It's not a terrible idea to pull your closer in that situation to shut down a game without wasting a lot of other bullpen pieces. When it doesn't work out, a lot of people raise an eyebrow at it. I raised an eyebrow at it when he made the decision. They brought in Helsley for a 5-out save. He had it in the 8th inning, came back out, threw a lot of pitches, and just didn't have it in the 9th. Inevitably loads the bases. They bring in someone else. They couldn't get the job done. They couldn't hold it down, and the Phillies put up 6 runs. I really think the Cardinals should have won that game. And then you get to a game 3, anything can happen. I think the Cardinals were a much more competitive team than that 0-2 record in the wild card series is going to show. I mean, they had a lot to play for. They were obviously motivated. I think that they do have a good team. Not as good as what is represented in the postseason, but they did have a good team. And, I will say this about the Cardinals. Of course, everybody's talking about Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols, and their careers and the legacies. All that is important. Make no mistake. Frankly, Albert Pujols was one of the greatest players of, frankly, my entire life. So that being said, it was nice to see them both get a hit on their way out in their last at-bats. That was nice. I kind of expected more from the Cardinals, so it was a little bit disappointing to see them go out. I expected the Braves to put them away. Shocked that the Phillies did it. And you know what? That's credit to the Phillies. They came in, they played great, and they managed to come back and win in game 1. I said right then when the Phillies won, when they put up the 3rd run, I said right then to whoever was with me at the time, hey, the Phillies just won this series. On that one hit, they just won this series. The moment they went up 3-2, because the Cardinals eventually tied it or got to 3 runs in the bottom of the 9th, but it was never going to be enough. The Phillies had the momentum at that point, and they took it. They took it from the Cardinals. So credit to them. Of course, now they're facing the Atlanta Braves in the division series. I think their challenge just got a lot harder. I think they've already beat expectations for Philadelphia this year. Obviously, Philadelphia wanted to be much better than what they are this year. I think we can all understand why. But I don't think they, are how do I put this? They obviously want to win in the division series, make no mistake. But I don't think that it would be a huge shocker if the Phillies did not win this series. I don't think it'd be a huge shocker to the Philly fan base. I think it was a shock to the Cardinals fan base a bit that they lost a wild card, because they were, in the regular season anyway, they were a better team. And, it's kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see Wainwright. That's kind of what I was waiting on for Game 3, was to see Wainwright pitch for the Cardinals, possibly one last time. We'll see what happens next year. Harrison Barnhart says, hey, Tyler, go Braves. Let's see. Traction Jackson says, I love the Strider signing. Not so sure about the Morton signing, though. Yeah, look, a lot of people have talked about that Morton signing. I tried to go into detail about it. There was a player option for Morton anyway next year for $20 million. So the Braves aren't spending any extra money. I told you then, at that time, when Morton happened, a lot of people weren't happy about it. I told you that I thought it was an indication of more to come. I think payroll's increasing for obvious reasons. The Braves are being successful right now. The World Series revenue, the attendance revenue for this year, they're very successful right now, and financially and on the field. And those two go hand in hand if you don't notice across baseball. But that being said, Morton is interesting because, yes, he's on his last couple of years. We don't know quite what he can contribute. He is far from the first guy to go from a starter to a reliever. I want you to keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it is an option. And I think he'd be a good back-of-the-end rotation guy. I don't think there's anything wrong with Morton being our Odorizzi next year, right? If that's our best option for a 5th starter. I mean, would you really not take that trade? I would. So for people to look at it and go $20 million, I mean, yeah, it's for 1 year. When you sign a 1-year deal, you're naturally going to get more, right? Look at Michael Harris. Michael Harris signed 10 years, $100 million, right? Basically getting $10 million a year. Strider signs a 6-year deal today for 75. That's way more per year. It's more per year, but it's less time to agree to. And that works well for the teams because it's less years they have to commit to one player that, they're not so sure about for that much money. But for the player, it works out because it's more money up front. So for Morton, 1 year, $20 million. Kenley Jansen, beginning of this year, $18 million for 1 year. Josh Donaldson, $20+ million a couple of years ago for 1 year. Marcelo Ozuna, I think, got like $18 million for the 1 year we signed him to before the 4-year deal. So I think you have to realize that typically with shorter deals, you're going to get paid more up front. That's not all the time, but it is most of the time. John Kruger brings up a good point. He says he's got a hunch that Strider will be on the roster. I believe so. Ozzie is unlikely. I said that last night. Ozzie is unlikely at this point. I don't expect him to be on the roster. I'd be surprised if he was, even as a pinch runner. I don't think he's going to be on the roster, not when you have the pieces that we do. I think they're going to want him to rest, and I think they're going to want him to be able to play in the NLCS, possibly the World Series if we get there. But I think that you're right. I think Strider is going to be on the roster. He's too good not to be, because let's say he feels good going into Game 4 or Game 5. Let's say that they've just evaluated him and he's ready to go for Game 4 or Game 5. Who do you want, Odorizzi or a 75% Strider or 80% Strider? I'll take my chances with Strider. And even if he comes out of the pen, dude was electric out of the pen at the beginning of this year. No doubt about it. He was absolutely phenomenal out of the pen. That's why everybody wanted him to be a starter. So if I've said all year long, especially when we were talking about whether or not Strider could be a bullpen or could be a starter, I spoke about. I get all that, but the dude is so good out of the pen. I kind of debated with you. Now, yeah, he's great as a starter, but out of the pen, that guy is electric. And if he can come in, throw strikes in the postseason, get outs, and frankly, in a timely manner and quickly, then I think out of the pen, maybe even long relief was a good option if he cannot start, if they're not so sure about him starting. But we'll see. Let's see. A lot of you guys tuning in tonight. Really do appreciate it. Remember to like the video. It really does help the channel. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Of course, we will be here tomorrow night. This second microphone, you might have heard it earlier. I have it right here. That is for someone else tomorrow. Special guest we're having. I guess I'll go ahead and announce it. We're having a special guest tomorrow night. Former Atlanta Brave. Also former Philadelphia Philly. Former Milwaukee Brewer. Former Washington National. And also a former All-Star, Silver Slugger, and a good friend of mine, Johnny Estrada, will be in studio tomorrow to do a watch-along. I don't know when in the game we're going to get on. We're going to get on as soon as we can. Whenever he gets in, we'll be on. I expect around the 3rd or 4th inning, maybe a little bit before that, so make sure to keep an eye out. If you don't have notifications on, make sure to cut them on. I'll be talking to Johnny. We'll be watching the game. Of course, you can tune in. If you super chat, you can ask Johnny a question. Any of that, he's very easygoing. And look, how often do you get to talk to a former player while watching a postseason game? Not very often. You guys get direct communication to him right here at On Deck. So that is exciting, and I hope you guys will tune in tomorrow night. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. First time we've had a special guest at On Deck Studios, so I'm looking forward to it a lot. And Johnny's a good friend of mine. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. So make sure you tune in and make sure you're a part of it. And, of course, super chats do get priority, and they do get you questions to Johnny. So if you super chat, that is a question for Johnny Estrada. So have your questions ready for Johnny. Of course, again, former All-Star, 2004, Silver Slugger that year as well. Played for Bobby Cox, played with Leo Mazzoni, a lot of the former Braves, Chipper Jones. He played with a lot of those guys. So do your research, get some questions for Johnny. I'm sure he'll have a lot of fun answering them for you. Let's see. Might Be Genius said, if we keep Freed, Wright, and Strider, they will be the Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz for this generation and the rest of the 2020s. That would be great. I hope so. I hope that, these guys are in a Braves uniform for a long time. Wright is locked down for a while. Fried is not. Fried is locked down for a couple more years. Hopefully they'll sign him to a big-time deal at the end of the year, much like hopefully they will Swanson. Other than that, Strider's locked in. So I that would be great if they can pitch to that level. Now, granted, we all thought that it was going to be Fried, Soroka, and Fulte at one point too. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes these guys are going to have struggles. They're going to have fall-offs, and we got to be patient with that. But I think you're right. I think the talent is there. I think the motivation is there. The character is there, and I think these guys are the guys to do that. If they are on the Braves right now, it's those guys. Nicholas says, wonder what the Braves will do with Jackson Stevens. I mean, we have Luke Jackson coming back, but he's a solid guy to have. Look, Jesse Chavez, as much as I like Jesse Chavez, because I do, as good as he is throwing long relief, Jackson Stevens is a very good long reliever. That's what I think his true strength is that he is a long reliever. He's not a guy, he is a guy that can come in and throw one inning, but he is one of those guys that you can send out there inning, whether you're winning by 4, losing by 4, or in a competitive matchup and you're down pitching. He is that guy. And so is Jesse. Jesse's getting a little older. Jackson's a little younger. I would give the edge there to Jackson. And Jackson's proven to be a reliable hand. So I hope that Jackson remains, with us. I don't know what his current contract status is, but he's been great. I like him. I think he could be actually a very influential part of the pen this postseason. Let's see. Suarez is listed for tomorrow, so it will be Max Fried and Ranger Suarez. I think, look, they're going to throw their best at us. We're going to throw our best at them. I think Max Fried, when the postseason is on the line, I think Max Fried is the guy I want on the mound for sure. Let's see. Corey Carter says, if the Braves can beat the 100-win Dodgers last year, then the Phillies can beat the 100-win Braves this year. Agreed, absolutely. I'm not saying that the Phillies don't have a chance. They certainly do. We did last year. The Braves were not a 100-win team last year. They were an 89-win team last year. The Phillies are an 87. I do think that the talent on the Braves last year far supersedes the talent on the Phillies this year in terms of a complete team. Now, look, they have star power. Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, JT Realmuto, Alec Boehm. They got guys. Make no mistake, they have guys. But I think the Braves are a much more complete team. They're in the wild card for a reason. They're in the postseason for a reason. I just don't think they're going to topple the Braves. And I say that, and if it happens, everybody's going to say, oh, you said it was not going to happen. It could. What I am telling you is I think it is very improbable. But we will see. PlayStation says, I hope Acuna Jr. hits for a better average so he can get on base a lot during these playoffs. Yeah, Acuna on the base pass is dangerous. The dude had the most stolen bases a few years ago. Obviously, with the leg injury, that's changed a little bit, but the dude is still, a playmaker on the base pass. And, he can go first to third just as good as anybody. And I would prefer him to be ready to go when the time is called. Guys, do me a favor. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and, of course, hit the bell for notifications so that you know right when we go live tomorrow night. Of course, tomorrow night, very special occasion. Game 1 of the NLDS between the Braves and the Phillies. We will have a special guest in studio, former All-Star, former Atlanta Brave, and former Philadelphia Philly. So he's been on both sides of the track in this matchup. Johnny Estrada will be here tomorrow night. He will answer your questions if you bring it to him, and I'm sure he's looking forward to it just as much as I am. I've been talking on the phone with him all day. He's looking forward to talking to you guys and, of course, watching some good baseball. Nicholas says, one guy I hope they don't bring back is Odorizzi. I'm sure he's a nice guy and he did nothing wrong, but he also hasn't played for what we traded him for. No, I think he has. As much as I like Will Smith, and I like Will Smith a lot. He's a friend of the channel. We interviewed him this year, all right, probably a month before he got traded. I like Will Smith a lot. He had his struggles, and, he's had his struggles in Houston too. I think it was an equal trade. We got rid of a left-handed reliever that was struggling. They got rid, of a starter that was struggling, and we needed a starter more so than a reliever. Our bullpen was pretty stacked and got more stacked at the trade deadline with the addition of Raisel Iglesias. And Will Smith, as much as we are fans of Will Smith and what he did in last year's postseason, it was a struggle this year. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen again. But, maybe we'll see him in the World Series and he'll shut us out. Who knows? But right now, Odorizzi, I think, is a pretty equal trade at this point, as much as we're not going to like to hear that. Lori Lee says last year's world champs won 88 games. They had no hope against the Dodgers. The players need to take the Phillies seriously. Absolutely they do. And if you think that coaching staff is not making that perfectly clear, I think you'd be mistaken. If there's one coaching staff that I have full faith is taking the Phillies seriously, it is a coaching staff that consists of, number 1, Brian Snicker, number 2, Ron Washington. That guy, I talked to him the other day. You've all seen the interview. He quote, if we come in and we play our brand of baseball at the best level, we can beat anybody. But if the Phillies come in and play their brand of baseball, they can beat anybody too. And I really think the home field advantage is going to play in the Braves' favor. I would be surprised if it didn't. I think the Braves need to win Game 1 and Game 2, especially with Fried and Wright on the mound. You go deeper in the series, I get a little worried because obviously Morton, Odorizzi, I don't know that Odorizzi pitches. I don't know that happens. I think it very well, if Strider can pitch, I think he will. And if it gets down to it, I think they'll make that decision because at that point, season's on the line. And, I think ultimately it will be that Strider pitches Game 3, Morton pitches Game 4, Fried's back for Game 5 if need be. Ideally, you get it done way before that and you walk into the Dodgers series pretty well rested. That would be ideal, but it's not for certain. So, we'll have to see how it goes and how it ages, but that's how I feel right now. Let's see. Jake Hobby says, pretty sure Odorizzi will be back. I think he's signed through at least next year. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be back as a starter. Jake Odorizzi's pitched out of the pen before, too, and that's really what I think his role is destined to be if the Braves have their way. And what I mean by that is if Strider is in. If Strider is in, that's really going to determine a lot of their roster. That's going to determine a lot of what they do. Jake Odorizzi could be long relief, or even short relief. He's pitched out of the bullpen before, like I mentioned. He's pitched in the postseason before. I think he will be on the roster for the postseason this year purely for that experience. And that is something to be said. In terms of next year, I don't know. But just because he signed through next year doesn't necessarily mean he will be back. It just doesn't. The Braves could outright release him if they so desire, but he also could be back. You're right. Nicholas says he has a player option, so the Braves don't want to pay him. He may walk. Yeah, true. Absolutely. THP says, I could see the Yankees losing. I could too. I said that earlier. The Guardians are, of course, facing the Yankees, and I think it's going to be a good series with good pitching and, of course, good offenses. Both of these offenses are on fire right now. The Yankees headliner, of course, being Aaron Judge, who hit 62 homers this year. But beyond that, the Guardians, here's where I stand on it. The Guardians are hitting some of their best baseball right now. Jose Ramirez just hit a homer in the wild card game, and they had a walk-off in the next day. So, I think they're playing exciting baseball right now. This is going to be one of the most fun series, I think, is the Guardians and Yankees. That being said, the Yankees do have some advantage. Plus, they have, however you want to rank Garrett Cole at the moment, in what he could be. Garrett Cole has been one of the best pitchers in the game before. Wasn't too great in the postseason last year. So I really think that series could go either way. But Nestor Cortez is really good. Luis Severino, we don't really know what we're going to get out of Luis Severino. We know what we're going to get out of Shane Bieber, though. Luis Severino recently returned from injury. If it gets down to it, the Cleveland Guardians could very well win that series. But we'll have to wait and see. Only time will tell. Next time we do one of these streams after one of these series is over, we'll be able to tell you. I about slipped up right there. Glad I caught myself. Nicholas says, well, right now our rotation is Fried, Wright, Strider, and Morton. We need one more solid guy, but we could also look internally to get it. Yeah, I've mentioned the idea of Bryce Elder for the postseason. I think that is still an option. I think they're debating Bryce Elder and Jake Odorizzi. I think they were looking at that debate. What I read the other day in Mark Bowman's mailbag was basically the Braves are valuing Odorizzi's postseason experience. And how can you not? The postseason is a different animal. To have experience in it is a different animal. But at the same token, the Braves pitched Tucker Davidson in Game 5 last year. He then lost pretty outstandingly. But they did do it before, and they could do it again with Bryce Elder. Only time will tell. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. Hopefully we're pitching Strider and Morton as our last resort. But it could get to that. It's all about depth and who you got. Let's see. Cool Monkey says, first, y'all got to beat the Phils, so I wouldn't be taking the championship game yet, or talking championship game yet. Look, I'm not talking anything too ahead of ourselves. I'm looking simply at the Braves' path to the World Series. To get to the World Series, they, of course, have to beat the Philadelphia Phillies, which is a challenge, and it's not something that I think the Braves are going to walk through without a loss. If I had to pick it, I would probably pick the Braves in 4. I don't think the Braves will ever face elimination against the Phillies. I'd be surprised. But, it could happen. That being said, if you're looking ahead, the next step is, of course, the championship game. So, if the Braves beat the Phillies, they go to the championship game. The winner of that goes to the World Series. It happened last year. I'm sure I'm talking to a Phillies fan right now when I say this, but we are not overlooking the Philadelphia Phillies. Philadelphia Phillies proved themselves in a wild card game. But I think any logical person, including a Philadelphia Phillies fan, would look at this and say that, well, yeah, the Braves are probably the better team. You're probably looking at it going, can we steal this series? And that's how you should be looking at it, is can we steal this series? Very similar to how the Braves were looking at it in 2018 when taking on the Dodgers in the very same scenario. The Phillies are just not there with the Braves right now. I don't think they're as complete. Again, they have star power, but I don't think they're as complete. I would be surprised if the Phillies won the series. Very, very, very surprised if they won the series. And again, I'm only speaking from a logical standpoint. It would be surprising if the Padres won their series. It would be surprising if the Mariners won their series. It would be surprising if the Guardians won it, to tell you the truth. It would be really surprising if any wildcard team made it beyond the division round because, again, short rest, and all of those sort of things play against your favor. Every challenge is against you. And I know a lot of people look at that and go, well, my team can overcome those challenges. Sure. It's well within your fan right to feel that way. But the challenges are all against you. Home field advantage, against you. Short rest, against you. Not the ability to set your rotation, against you. And, some of that can play into your favor. Like rest is something that, is it good or is it bad? It depends on the team. So it is something that could potentially play into your favor. That being said, I do think the Braves are the obvious favorite here, and I don't even think it's a question. Let's see. Nick says exactly so. Any of those 5 can be 5 or even if we want a 6. It feels like Odorizzi has no spot unless he's used for bullpen. Look, Odorizzi has a spot. I do believe at least he's getting a bullpen spot. He has been valuable to the team at times. I do think he will be on the roster. I'd be surprised if he wasn't, because if he wasn't and the Braves needed him, who would be looking stupid at that point? We would. Let's see. I'm trying to look for actual questions. You guys have been great tonight. Remember, Super Chats do get priority. A lot of you guys are being active in the chat, and I do appreciate it. Super Chats put you at the front of the line, and that is simply so I can narrow it down. So thank you guys for tuning in, and of course they do help the channel as well. But you guys have been awesome here recently, of course, with the final series against the Mets. That was a fun time. And also, of course, everything in the postseason has been a lot of fun as well. So thank you guys for all of the support. Thank you guys for continuing to watch On Deck. I really do appreciate it. So thank you for that. Let's see what we got. Yeah, Might Be Genius brings up a good point. A Houston team with a healthy Verlander is always scary. Yeah, from the American League side, the Astros are interesting. You look at Game 1, and I said this earlier, but you look at Game 1, the obvious favorite just from pitching alone is the Astros. I mean, you have Justin Verlander, who's been great this year. No reason to expect he'll have a decline. Granted, if it can happen to DeGrom and Scherzer, it can happen to anybody, but I don't believe it will happen to Verlander there. And that really gives the Astros a big advantage, an advantage that they did not have last year when facing the Braves. They did not have Verlander last year when facing the Braves. And you could say that the Braves would have won anyway, but, it's hard to say. I mean, it really is hard to say. The Braves won last year, and it was great, make no mistake, but there is that question of, well, what would have happened if Verlander had been available? What would have happened? And look, at the end of the day, the Braves walked away the World Series champions, but now, if you're the Astros, I look at it and I go, well, we got Verlander now. Things have changed. And you have Verlander on top of Christian Javier, Jose Urquidy, and so many other arms for the Houston Astros. You have that atop everything you had last year in the World Series. You now add a Hall of Famer in Justin Verlander, a Hall of Famer who's far from done. So we'll see how it goes. But we don't have to worry about that unless we make it to the World Series. Let's just hope we get there. Nicholas says, the Braves, I feel like, have a bit of a logjam in pitching right now. It would be interesting to see. Maybe they move Strider to bullpen again. If they move Strider to the bullpen, it would be temporary. It would not be permanent. Not for paying him for 6 years like they're doing. A bullpen piece like Strider, you don't pay 6 years. You just don't. And it would just be very surprising to me. I think that is a very temporary thing. I think Strider has proven himself to be a very valuable starter. Something that, I'll be honest with you, at the beginning of the year, I questioned heavily, even going as far as asking Leo Mazzoni what he thought about it. And that being said, it's not everything. It's of course, I look at Strider and I look at this deal and I say, well, that's a starter deal. 6 years, $75 million. And I know that's, a lot of people are going to tell you, well, that's just because the Braves are really good at locking down pitching or locking down young players. They are good at doing that. But that being said, it's not everything. The fact that Strider has proved himself this year as a starter does mean something. And the Braves are locking down a guy that is that good. And real quick, I'm going to play you. This is me asking Leo Mazzoni early this year. I think it'll play. If not, we'll get right back to it. This is me asking Leo Mazzoni early this year about whether or not Strider could even be a starter. Because I questioned it. The dude had 2 pitches at the beginning of the year. Guess how many pitches he has today? 2, and he's been just as electric with it. So here's me talking to Leo Mazzoni. Of course, this interview is on the channel as well. But with a guy like that who has 2 pitches, maybe 3, how successful can they be as a starter?
If you got 2 going, you're going to win. If you got 3 going, you're going to throw a shutout. And if you get narrowed down to 1, you're going to lose. So therefore, he could be. Okay. Absolutely. You're talking about Hall of Fame pitchers that go into the Hall of Fame with 3 pitches. And if you're talking about a guy that that can pitch multiple innings and has more than 1 pitch, and if you got, we used to have that saying: if you got 2 going, you're going to win. If you got 3 going, you're going to throw a shutout, and if you're narrowed down to 1, you're going to lose.
From the Braves Hall of Famer himself, 14 division titles, doesn't get any more educated than Leo Mazzoni when it comes to pitching. That being said, he saw it before I did. He saw it well before I did because, I'm not a master of pitching like Leo Mazzoni is, and I really question whether or not Strider could be a starter, and not because I didn't think he had the stuff. I knew he had the stuff, but would that stuff last the 3rd time through the order? Would that stuff last 3 months into the season? Would he be reliable come October? Boy, was I wrong. Boy, did I absolutely miss it. I missed it bad. And Leo Mazzoni, it shouldn't be a surprise. Leo Mazzoni knows more about pitching than I do, for sure. But yeah, that was, something that we talked about, something that was discussed. That being said, Strider has proven himself. He's earned the 6-year, $75 million deal. And I think the Braves aren't done. I think they'll continue to sign players, especially young players. But, they're keeping that core together. I think Spencer Strider is going to be part of that core. And I think that core, meaning the rotation, is here to stay. Hopefully they'll be able to line up Fried and Kyle Wright for just as long, and maybe even, in a couple of years, line up Bryce Elder or Kyle Muller, whoever it may be. But I think the Braves pitching staff is secure, and I think Strider's going to be a big part of it. In terms of being log jammed, you could say that, but it's a good problem to have. When you have Charlie Morton, who's in the back of your rotation on any given day, you're doing pretty well. Now, Odorizzi, question mark for sure. I think you could get one more certified closer and move Odorizzi to the pen, or trade him, or do whatever you want to in the offseason. If you were building a perfect team, I would add one more solidified starter. A lot of you guys would love Carlos Rodon. I would too. But one more guy like that to just fit into that 4 hole and have Morton on the back end, I think would make the Braves unstoppable for the next couple of years. Nicholas says, I would hope he is not clearly a good starter, but if they risk injury or other problems, they would try to throw him in the pen. I really hope he starts. I mean, I think that's obvious for Strider. I think we all hope he starts. He'd be electric out of the pen for sure, but I think at this point we hope he starts. That being said, moving on from that, I think if he does come out of the pen, that is, again, a very temporary thing. I think that is him just giving what he can give at that point, more so than it is an actual strategy. I think if anybody's going to be moved to the pen, it's Odorizzi. But we will see. Skyler says the Padres have had better plate appearances than they did in the regular season, so hopefully they take the Dodgers to 5. That would be great if they took the Dodgers to 5. The problem with the Dodgers is that they have so much depth. I mean, especially in starting pitching. I'm going to pull up their depth chart real quick and just read it off to you. Their starters are freaking ridiculous. The Dodgers are a good team, as they are every single year. But, it's all about who shows up at the right time. We saw that last year. I think the Dodgers were a better team throughout 2021, wouldn't you agree? And the Braves managed to take them down in dominating fashion. So let's see. Their starters. Listen to this. Now, Walker Buehler's hurt. He's on 60-day IL. But Tyler Anderson, who has a 2.57 ERA, Julio Urias, who has a 2.16 ERA, Tony Gonsolin with a 2.14 ERA, Clayton Kershaw with a 2.28 ERA. Now, granted, he's thrown far less innings than normal. Andrew Heaney on the back end with, God forbid, an ERA over 3. He's at 3.10. So you have 4 guys with an ERA under 2.60, and you have one guy who's right above 3. That's their back end of the rotation. So they have depth. The Padres aren't going to have to face all of the Dodgers' depth because they're only playing 5 games. That being said, they have quite the starting rotation to get them through. Of course, their bullpen, it doesn't get any easier. You got Craig Kimbrell to deal with, Phil Bickford to deal with, Bruce Dark-Gratterall. There's guys on there that, the Dodgers are stacked. There's no way around it. They are just absolutely stacked. They have David Price pitching in the bullpen, for heaven's sake. They have a lot of guys. And, that being said, as many guys as they got, the Padres are not going to have to face it. It would be great if they somehow took them to 5. I would expect the Dodgers to win this. I just would. And part of that is because they're the Dodgers and because they've been that big monster on the other end of the bracket for the Braves so many years. But I think, the Padres are having better appearances. They are doing better as of late. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make a difference. I really think the Dodgers are that much better than the Padres. And the Padres are coming off short rest. But the Padres, again, it's all about who shows up when. We will see. We have a super chat. Skyler says the West is weak. You would be correct. I would agree with you on that. Thank you for that. The West is very weak. And I think the NL East has proven, at least for this year, that the NL East is underrated. Look at this. What do you notice about this? What do you notice about the National League side? Okay, how about the fact that 3 out of the 5 teams in the NL East are in it when there's 8 teams? You have 2 teams from the West. You have 1 from the Central. 1 from the Central. Central's garbage. That's beside the point. But 3 of the 5 teams in the NL East made it to the postseason. Now, yes, I know that there's expansion and all that, but that is representative of what the NL East has been for years. The fact that the Braves and the Mets both won 100 games while also having to face each other and having to face the pitching of the Marlins, it's the only bad team in the NL East, if we're honest, is the Nationals. The Marlins, they're not great in the record book, but they are difficult to deal with. You're talking about Pablo Lopez, Sandy Alcantara. That rotation, if they had offense, they'd be a great team. So what I say to you is this. The Dodgers really only have to deal with the Padres. There's not a whole lot in the West. So, Skyler, thanks for the super chat. You're absolutely correct. The West is weak, and that could reflect some in the ERA. But the fact that you have these guys, 5 guys with an ERA below 260, it does speak to the depth. I mean, compare that to the Braves. It's not, I think the Braves have 3 guys that would be in that conversation, possibly. So it's not quite the same. That being said, for the Padres, I really question the Padres' ability to win the series. Truly. And I mean that with all due respect to them. They, of course, took down the mighty Mets, thank goodness. But I look at the Padres, and I really do question whether or not they can win this. I do, because, again, you're facing the Dodgers on short rest. The Dodgers, look, I know we took them down last year. That was great. But this team is very good as well. For the Padres this year, they have, let's see. Yeah, just from an ERA standpoint alone, I look at it and I see, well, okay, Yu Darvish had a 3.10 ERA. I think he could beat the Dodgers. I think he could keep their offense to a minimum. Joe Musgrove, 2.93 ERA. And that's really as best it gets. And every Dodgers 4 out of the 5 beat Joe Musgrove. That's really the best ERA it is. And I'm looking at one stat. I'm aware of that. Of course, they have Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Mike Clevenger on the back end there, and Sean Manaea. There are guys, and of course their bullpen. They have, of course, Josh Hader. They have Luis Garcia and Taylor Rogers. They have guys. They are there. But I really do question whether or not they can beat the Dodgers. If they can get them to 5, that would be great. But we'll see. Let's see. Matthew says, hey, Tyler, is it just me or is the Strider extension too short? We only bought out 1 free agency year and paid him $75 million. We can keep him for a second free agent year, but that will cost another $22 million. Well, if you notice in the deal, I think the deal doesn't get expensive until later on. And that is because he is, it allows the Braves to do a few things. The next few years, you can get guys that influence the team. I really look for the Braves to do something this offseason. I would be very surprised if the Braves and Liberty Media did not spend some money on a couple of free agents. I would be surprised. One of those being Dansby Swanson, cross your fingers, but I think the Braves are going to explore some options. That being said, when it comes to this deal does not really get expensive until later on. So what that allows the Braves to do is explore options in the next 3 to 4. Attendance is only going to get better, in this window when you have Olsen, Riley, Ozzie, hopefully Swanson at some point, Acuna, Michael Harris, and hopefully your pitching staff. When you have all those guys locked up and you have that core locked up, attendance is going to be fine. Winning is going to be fine. They're going to want to improve, and I think they're going to do it. I'd be really surprised if we didn't see a starter added to the Braves next year. I'd be very, very surprised. So thank you for that, Matthew. We have another super chat. Malik Brooks, he tunes in. He says, 5 straight NL East championships. Yeah, and look, that's a far cry from 14 that we did back in the early 2000s, but look, we'll take it. 5 was nice. Number 5 specifically was very nice to win that against the Mets. Lori Lee says, this is an interesting one. She says, I think the Cardinals' arrogance and their perceived destiny to win it for Pujols and Yachty backfired. I think Pujols and Yachty were definitely on the mind, but I'll tell you this. Something I noticed about that particular storyline. Pujols and Yachty, from what I saw, did not come back out and wave to the crowd. They did not make it about themselves. They contributed in their last at-bats. They both got on base. They both got hits. I think the Cardinals, I don't think the Cardinals did wrong by honoring who they had, right? It's very rare that you see 3 guys in Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols, and Adam Wainwright really all stick together in some form or fashion. Adam Wainwright, Yadier Molina more so, but Pujols, let's be real, Pujols is a Cardinal. He'll go into the Hall of Fame as a Cardinal, and he is a Cardinal. His best years were with St. Louis. I don't think there's anything wrong with what they did. Pujols had a great year this year, got to 700 homers. You're talking about a once-in-a-lifetime hitter, and that guy was phenomenal. Yadier Molina, a lot of people are debating whether or not he's a Hall of Famer. I would probably lean on the side of he is, based on his numbers against catchers. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Look back to 2012. I hate to say it was against Cardinals. It was against Cardinals. But think about what the Braves were playing for in 2012. It was, essentially, maybe not what they were playing for. Let me backtrack. Think about what the fans were watching for in 2012. Yes, the Braves were in the postseason, but it was also chippers last year. And I think it's a very similar attitude. So I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I think what backfired, honestly, was Game 1. Because Game 1, you're up 2-0. You guarantee yourself a Game 3, and they didn't do it. And then the Phillies, of course, won Game 2 and put them down. And as unfortunate as that is for the end of those guys' careers, and potentially Wainwright, we don't really know yet. As unfortunate as that is, the Phillies stole it, and we'll see. Might be genius says Philly fans should be happy with what happened this year already. They overachieved. They stole it from the Brewers just to make it to the postseason. That is something to keep in mind. The Phillies almost weren't in the wild card. It was almost the Brewers. I'll be honest with you, and if you're a Philadelphia fan, you're not going to like the sound of this. I would rather play Philadelphia than the Brewers. I think the Brewers are a little bit more dangerous. Frankly, we saw them in the postseason last year. It wasn't a comfortable series. I would not want to do it again. Philadelphia, I'm actually very excited about. This is a National League East matchup. We're very familiar with Philadelphia. On the same token, Philadelphia is very familiar with us. But it's a familiar foe as opposed to someone who we don't see a lot of. And, Philadelphia, I feel good, walking into that series. I really do. So that being said, Philadelphia, they controlled their own destiny just as much as the Braves did by beating the Mets. The Braves controlled their own destiny. They probably had the most exciting, conclusion to the season as anybody did, the regular season as anybody did, because who else wins the division in such exciting fashion? Who else did? No one. And that being said, both of these teams are cut from the same cloth in that regard, but they're not cut from the same cloth with being complete teams. You're talking about a team 87 wins versus another team who has 14 more with 101 who took the division, and you're talking about a first place team versus a third place team in the same division. They're not cut from the same cloth. And I do think the Braves are much more complete. That being said, it's all about who shows up. We have a super chat. It is from Johnny T. Thank you, sir. He says, I feel like that's what hurts LA the most, is that they win their division by 100 games and they have to rev back up when the postseason comes. Yeah, I think you're referring to the West being weak. The West is weak. And I actually spoke to a current player about this not too long ago. I'm not going to name his name, but I did speak to him about it. He actually brought this up because he brought up the schedule next year. The schedule next year is going to be that you face everybody, and everybody's going to face everybody. I think you're going to see a much more, how do I put this, common ground when it comes to the records, because the Dodgers have been winning 100 games, year after year. The Braves have been right there with them, and it hasn't really been represented. Now, granted, last year for the Braves is an anomaly, but for the years prior to that, it was kind of odd. The Central, who cares about who's first place in the Central, right? It's just not very representative. So if you play everybody, it'll be a little bit more representative of what the records actually are. And you won't just beat up on the bad teams in your division if you're in the Central and you're St. Louis, or you won't beat up on the bad teams, in the West, or and for us it's Miami and Washington D.C. But that goes for everybody, and I do think it'll be a much more even way of measuring who's good and who's bad. But to your point, the Dodgers, getting kind of comfortable and ready to go, I think there's truth to that, because I look at last year, I look at where the Braves were halfway through the season, and when this guy right here showed up and wrote this fancy letter, I think, when that happened, it revved the Braves up and carried them all the way through the season. And they had to fight. They had to fight every step of the way. They barely took it from the Phillies. They barely took the division from the Phillies. And they managed to do that and led them into the postseason, where they were still fighting for every little thing, led them to the World Series, where they were still fighting for every little thing. And they won. And they beat the Dodgers in NLCS because they had to fight for everything. They had to fight for everything they earned. It's kind of like, a metaphor, I guess, It's kind of like, the guy that is given everything and then the guy who has to work for it. It's who's going to be more successful later on in life. And that's kind of a similar conversation, I guess. Let's see. Gonna just pick a random spot to choose from. Chris Kaysen says, Quad God Strider. Woo! Can even be a scarier pitcher to face if he can officially add the changeup to his arsenal. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mentioned that earlier, or I mentioned that earlier in the year, rather, because I was looking at, the sabermetrics. I was looking at how many pitches he threw and, where they were and all that. Took a deep dive in it. And he threw the changeup, I think, like 2% of the time. It was like a rare thing. Like, he just did it to do it. I think, with that, if he can add a changeup, if he can add something else even, it would just be crazy. If he became like a 5-pitch pitcher, things get very, very weird for Strider. And it would be in a good way. I think that would be crazy because he's so talented already with 2 pitches. If he got a third, he'd be nuts. We have another super chat from the very same man I just answered. Tyler, who do you see stepping up to the 3 big impact players in the potential 5-game series versus the Phillies? That's a very good question. Here's the thing with that question. I wish I could give you a definite answer. I think the obvious answers would be Swanson, Olson, and Riley, hitting-wise. I think Fried would step up. I don't know if you want hitters or pitchers or if it matters. But in terms of hitters, I think the 3 obvious would be Swanson, Olson, and Riley. That being said, any of these guys in the lineup can do it. Olson, it would be my favorite in that list just because of how well he hit against New York, and Swanson in the same way. They both had 3 homers in that series. They both showed up when it matters. I just look at this guy and I say, well, I for some reason I want to say Olson here. I just do, and mainly because he gave me an interview, I guess. But truthfully, I think he's finally being himself. I think he's finally comfortable. I think he's been a great hitter for the Braves, and I think he could really make an impact in the postseason. I definitely think he wants to, and I think that for me, I look at him to make a big impact, specifically Olson. That could age to be nothing. I don't know. I hope that answered your question, Chris. But like you say in the chat right after that, I see it. It is such a team to choose from. Think about it from the top to the bottom. Acuna, Olson, Riley, Swanson, Michael Harris, Orlando Arcia could even pop off at times. It's a very good team. Ozuna could make a big difference. Anybody can. Rosario, good. We all remember the NLCS last year, so anything could happen. But I think it is something to keep in mind that anybody on this team could make an impact. And it's a great question. I wish I could give you a definite 3. That would be my favorites, would be Olson, Swanson, and Riley from a hitter's perspective. But I think you have to throw in Fried. I think you have to throw in the idea, at least, that Michael Harris could make an impact, or even another young player like Vaughn Grissom if he got a pinch hit at bat. Who would have guessed? I'll put it this way: 91. Who would have guessed that Francisco Cabrera would send the Braves to the World Series? It's hard to say. And that's the moment we all remember. Of course, Sid Bream sliding into home. That's the moment we all remember and know of the highlights, and that's the moment, right? Nobody would have guessed at that time that Francisco Cabrera would be the guy when you have guys like Fred McGriff, that's a little early, Ryan Klesko and Ronnie Gant and guys like that in the lineup. No one would even suspect Francisco Cabrera, to be the guy. And very similar to this year. There could be a guy that we don't even know is going to be the guy. Who would have guessed that Eddie Rosario would be the NLCS MVP? Or Jorge Soler would be the World Series MVP? It's all about who shows up at the right time. It'd be great for Swanson. It'd be great for Olson. It'd be great for Riley. I think they're the guys that are going to have to carry the team if there's guys that have to carry it. I'm not even mentioning Acuna. I'm just saying, there's so many guys. And that's what makes the Braves, so good. It really is. Let's see. Jamison Maisie. Yeah, we definitely need to make sure we re-sign Dansby. He cannot let another impactful player leave like what happened last offseason. Yeah, I don't really want to talk about that anymore. Of course, we all know what happened last offseason. We want to keep Dansby Swanson. No guarantees on that. I would suspect that he's coming back, but hard to say. Malik says, I'm going to watch the Olsen interview after this. You really should. Olsen is, I'll tell you, I asked for the interview. He couldn't have been nicer. I mean, this is like the guy that was just so humble, so friendly, so easygoing about everything. Answered any question I had, talked to me for 20 minutes after the interview off camera. I asked the questions for you guys, and then there's always one or two questions that I want to know off to the side. And there's questions that you wouldn't care about, honestly. But for me, Olsen was great. So he's been a guy that I've obviously rooted for all year long because of how nice he was. Similar to Matzik and Luke Jackson. I mean, there's always those guys that you pick. And for me, Olsen was just super friendly, super nice, easy to root for. He had a great series against the Mets. He's had a great year. A lot of people are going to draw comparisons, and that is what it is. But Matt Olsen was nothing but nice to me, and he's been nothing but a great player for the Atlanta Braves. You really ought to check out that interview, Malik, if you haven't already. Check out all the interviews. There's a ton out there. Of course, we play them pretty regularly at the top of the show. Phil Necro's a good one. It's an old one, but it's a good one. Dansby Swanson we interviewed for rookie year. Also my rookie year, to tell you the truth. If you watch that video, you'll see what I'm talking about. But that was the Dansby interview. But yeah, I mean, Ron Washington was a great interview. I mean, there's been, an infinite amount of guys that have given me interviews that have all been great. I would say Denny McClain is a good interview. It's 20 minutes long, but it's a good interview. Last 30-game winner. Kyle Wright. It was a good interview at the beginning of this year. They're all on the same playlist if you go to the channel. I really suggest you do that. And, of course, if you'll do me a big favor, Malik and the rest of you, do me a favor by liking the video. It really does help. It really does help the channel grow. And you don't believe me, but this channel keeps on growing, And I hope we get to 5,000 subscribers sooner rather than later. So with your help, we can do that. All you got to do is like the video. And if you haven't already, subscribe. That being said, also make sure you can follow me on social media. Those are the tags, Twitter and Instagram. Follow me there. You can follow me a little bit more closely. I post a little bit of updates, post memes, retweet stuff that I think is funny, that are Braves related and sometimes Mets related, depending on the day. So make sure to follow me there. And, of course, make sure to follow me here on YouTube. Let's see. Oh, man. Jameson says, oh, yeah, by the way, the Braves get the last laugh as we get to play the trumpet when William Contreras walks up to the plate. Yeah, we played that at the top of the show. We may play it to end the show, too. But we'll see. It's ya boy. I love that name, by the way. Ya boy. I love that. He says, I think Swanson is on the same level as Fried. Great player, hits well, great defense, and what it seems like is a clubhouse leader and an energy guy that you need on a competitive team. I think energy gets drawn up from all these guys. Acuna brings energy. Ozzie brings energy. Riley and Olsen have their own way of bringing energy. But Dansby is a guy that sort of brings everybody together. They call him the sheriff, apparently. So I think he is one of those guys that does do that, to your point. But, we'll see. I think Dansby is a very important piece to this franchise. Double A actually commented on it the other day, which was good to hear because he's been rather silent on it, which he was about Freeman too, so it's not really that surprising. I mean, he can only say so much. It's up to Dansby, really. It's not up to just Double A, so it's hard for him to just go, yeah, we're going to bring him back, no questions asked. He said that he expressed what you would expect him to express, that the Braves want to bring Dansby back. They plan to bring Dansby back, but there's obviously no guarantees. And you hope to do that. You hope to bring him back for the next season, but it is a business. I've said that so many times. Everybody wants me to just get on the Dansby's coming back train. I wish I could be. I truly wish I could be. I've said it before. I'm not going to waste that. I said it last year, guys, and I don't want to tell you something that's not correct. And I don't want to predict something and give you the reassurance that it's going to happen and it not, because it could backfire. I do lean towards the idea that Dansby will be back, but I don't want to guarantee anything, and that's kind of where I'm going to remain on that. Malik, he wants to know where I am from. I am not from Atlanta, believe it or not, even with all this Braves memorabilia. I live in a town called Columbus, Georgia. We're about an hour and a half south of Atlanta, downtown Atlanta, that is, about 2 hours from Truist Park. So I don't get to go to too many games. Instead, I watch them here primarily and live stream them. The games we do go to, we appreciate, though. But, yeah, that is where I'm from. I work for a local news channel here in town. And, You can find all that information on the community page and, of course, the About page. But yeah, I am from Columbus, Georgia. This is probably the last question I'm going to ask unless you super chat. Juicy Diamond says, which starting pitcher would the Braves choose, Jacob deGrom or Carlos Rodon, if they get a starter in the offseason? Well, if they can land deGrom, make no mistake, they're going to go for deGrom, even with his recent struggles. I mean, the dude's, that's not who Jacob deGrom is. He seems to figure it out, too. So we'll have to see on that. But for me, I think AA is going to be active this offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if starter was where he went, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I wouldn't care if it was Rodon or deGrom. I mean, obviously, given the choice, I'd probably go deGrom. But I like Rodon, too. I like both of those guys. I think the Braves have the money to spend. And I think either one of those guys would be a huge addition. You know, in terms of who's on the rotation right now, addition by subtraction. But I think that would be a huge addition. I think that would be the expected addition if the Braves were to do anything in the offseason. But my pick would probably be deGrom. But I would be super happy with Carlos Rodon in my 4-hole there in the starting rotation. I would be very happy with that as well. So with that, I think that's kind of where it is. But we will see. I think there's a lot to be said for the offseason. That time will come. Right now, of course, we have to focus on the postseason. The path for the Braves is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. This is it. Of course, we got to get to the Phillies. We got 5 games with the Phillies if it goes the distance. And if the Braves get past that, we will take the winner of the Padres and the Dodgers. Hopefully the Braves will be well rested for that series. Hopefully the Padres can take it to all 5, maybe with some extra inning magic as well. And, we'll see. Whoever the Braves have next is who they have next. Not going to worry about that today. We're going to focus primarily on the Phillies going forward. Again, tomorrow, big news. We will be live streaming. And this is a live stream that you don't want to miss. We will have former Atlanta Brave Johnny Estrada here with me, starting hopefully around 1:30. We'll be here and we'll be on here as quick as we can. The moment he gets in the door is the moment we're starting the stream. So make sure you tune in. And, of course, make sure to watch the game tomorrow. It's going to be very exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm sure you are, too. The Braves and the Phillies tomorrow night, or tomorrow afternoon, shall I say, at 1:07 p.m. Make sure you're watching. And, of course, please tune in. I really would appreciate it. We'll be going live really as long as you guys carry us. Again, if you super chat, that's how you would ask Johnny a question. Other than that, you're going to see me and Johnny go back and forth, talk about a mixture of his career and the current baseball game that we are watching and the current baseball in general. So we're going to talk. It's going to be a good conversation. Johnny's a lot of fun. You guys are going to see that tomorrow, and I cannot wait to see all of you guys back here tomorrow. So with that, again, thank you for the super chats. You guys were very active tonight. Really do appreciate that. Going to continue to cover the postseason right here at On Deck. Again, like the video on your way out. It really does help. There's 44 of you watching. Get all those likes in. Please do it. And, of course, also remember to subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell for notifications so that you're updated. You know right when we go live tomorrow night. All that good stuff. With that said, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you right here at On Deck.